There we go. Yes. Well, it might not have to turn me down because I'm doing like this. And I'm waiting. Good morning, sir. Oops. Happy Sabbath. Happy Sabbath. All right. We have a jam-packed lesson this week. Good morning. Jam-packed lesson this week. Might be a little loud. I'll take it down a little bit. Okay. All right. Lessons of faith from Joshua. God fights for you. Sabbath afternoon. The book of Joshua contains some disturbing scenes. Serious questions are raised by the concept of a divine or holy war portraying a group of people with a God-given mandate to destroy another group of people. The issue of divine war in the Old Testament is challenging. God appears in the Old Testament as the sovereign Lord of the universe. Therefore, everything that happens must somehow be related to his direct or indirect will. So the question, how can God allow such things, becomes inevitable. We've heard that 1,000 times, right? How could God allow such a thing to happen? Last week, we saw that God himself is involved in a conflict that is far greater than any war or battle fought in human history. A battle that permeates every aspect of our lives. We saw, too, that the events, both biblical and secular, in history can be fully understood only in light of this conflict. This week, we continue to explore the complexity of divinely sanctioned wars, the limitations and conditions of divine war, the final vision of peace offered by the Old Testament prophets, and the spiritual implication of such wars. Sunday, October 26th. Well, let's read the memory text. Memory text. And Joshua captured all these kings and their land at one time, because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. The Canaanites' iniquity. We need to look beyond the book of Joshua to completely understand what was meant by the iniquity of the nations inhabiting Canaan. These nations' abhorrent practices of child sacrifice, divination, sorcery, witchcraft, necromancy, and spiritualism give us a hint. Everybody knows what all those are, right? Divination, that's like when you roll some bones in a bowl and you try to tell the future. You know, that's necromancy or dice or whatever, looking at this, Zoroastrianism. I don't want to say Zoroastrianism. That's not it. What do you call it? When you're looking at the month, the horoscopes and things like that. Horoscopes. Necromancy. That's when you try to raise people from the dead, right? And the fact that it says that they practice this means that it possibly could have happened. And we have the story of Samuel when he pulled up. So that's one of those things that I'll just leave to conjecture. But, it could have been a spirit imitating a person that was dead. Whatever, we know it's very bad. We know it's evil, we know it's wicked, and we know that it's not of God. The discovery of ancient, this is an interesting word, Ugaritic text from Ras Sharma provide some insight into the Canaanite religion and society, and they demonstrate the condemnation of this culture was not only understandable, but according to Old Testament moral standards, also justified. The Canaanite religion was based on the belief that natural phenomena which assured fertility were controlled by sexual relationships between gods and goddesses. Thus, they envisioned the sexual activity of the deities in terms of their own sexual behavior and engaged in ritual sexual practices in order to incite the gods and goddesses to do likewise. This concept resulted in the institution of sacred prostitution involving both male and female prostitutes engaging in orgiastic rites, and again, all as part of their own religious practices. Super dark. A nation cannot rise to a moral ground that is higher than that of the gods its people worship. As a result of such an understanding of their deities, it is no wonder that the Canaanites' religious practices included child sacrifice, which the Bible warns specifically against. Archaeological evidence confirms that the inhabitants of Canaan regularly sacrificed their firstborn children to the gods, really demons, whom they worshipped, right? Little skeletons found crushed into large jars with votive inscriptions testified to their disregarding religion and what it meant for many of their children. To their degrading religion and what it meant for many of their children. I'm going to read all of this because it's basically the foundation of why this war took place, right? The eradication of the Canaanites then was not an afterthought, something that emerged in the wake of God's decision to give the land of Canaan to the Israelites. The inhabitants of Canaan were granted a time of probation, a time of additional mercy during which they had the opportunity to discover God and his character through the witness of the patriarchs living among them. They had the chance, but obviously they squandered it and continued in their horrific practices until the Lord finally had to put a stop to them. So we see what it was. It was judgment, right? It was like, it wasn't what people like to say is, oh, the Lord went through there and he committed genocide, right? These were people who were abhorrent. They were committing genocide, much like our country today, killing children just to do so. There may not be a spiritual element with most of them today, but there is a seriously demonic undertone of that happening, right? We can see in the news, they're always talking about who's with the Epstein files. What do they do with these children after they're no longer children anymore? Half of them get discarded, half of them get killed. Come on, it's really dark practices going on in our very country, and this is exactly the kind of behavior that the Israelites were coming in to inherit this land from them, right? The point was they weren't going anywhere. God said, hey, these people are, like Sodom and Gomorrah, their sin is coming up to my face. It's so bad. I have to get rid of these people, and I'm not going to do it through my own means. I'm going to use you. I'm going to use you. And one of the things that it also talks about later, which I don't want to spoil it. I won't spoil it because it's cool. It's cool to see how God thinks when he's systematically removing these people and the timing of how everything works. That's very interesting. Mm-hmm.
He gave them time and more time and more time. And God knew beforehand that if the Israelites had gone in to occupy the Canaanites, these practices here, the Israelites would automatically over a period of time adopt these practices because that happened to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you jumped ahead, so you spoiled it. It's fine. We might as well talk about it now. How God basically was like, I know we're going to get rid of these people in this area because as soon as you're there, like she said, they're going to not necessarily adopt it, but over time, you're going to intermingle with them, and your faith is going to be diminished by living in close proximity, and eventually, y'all going to be apostate too because you've done it before, Let me keep you out of this environment as a people because I know human weakness. I know it. I know the frailty. And basically, look how bad they were being, in a couple generations. Well, the previous generation had to die before they even got there. So God was bare. And then another thing he said is, there's another text that it says he's going to use wasp, right? Hornets. Hornets. He's going to use hornets to go in and sting them and get them out of there and slowly move them. So as the hornets come in and take over the land, then you can take over what's there, and the land will be desolate because I gave it to you all at one time. So he's like, hey, God is meticulous in this thing. Absolutely. And then slowly but surely, of course, the Israelites can move into those places and farm that land and keep it from, go ahead.
First of all, the land was already theirs to begin with. God had promised it to Abraham.
That's true.
But because of their, they had gone to Egypt and got stuck in Egypt. But they were slaves. They weren't fighters. So when they came back, God had to more or less really fight for them because they didn't know what they were, how to fight. They were slaves.
Yep, that's true.
Yep.
We can see that they eventually got the hang of it and started to militarize themselves, but the whole time God had a handicap for them.
Yeah. But God told them when they went in there, they were to cut down and break down all their
idols
and their
groves.
everything.
Yep.
Yeah. But the only thing that they were to keep, as far as the trees go, were the fruit trees. Anything that they could use for food, they should keep, not cut down. But every other tree they had to cut down.
So God had a meticulous instruction for them, and He was fighting for them because, of course, we know what Joshua eventually. We know how that story goes, right? But there's this common argument among non-believers that God is somehow evil because of how He killed all of these people, right? They love to bring that up as the stinky, the dirty laundry of Christians that God went in there and beheaded and killed. God is a murderer. He goes in there and he kills. That's genocide. He kills all those people.
Well, that's like when Achan stole those clothes from the Babylonian people when they had gone in and conquered that area. Achan had stolen them when they were told not to take anything, and the tragedy came upon them, and they had
to get rid of them.
Lots.
Yeah.
And when they found it was Achan, that the Lord took all the family, even the children. And people say, why are they taking the children? Because the children will grow up to be like the parents. They'll remember this, and they'll probably look for retribution.
Yeah, they could sow seeds of dissension in the camp, right? They're always going to be an opposition to the people who did the right.
So that was the reason.
Wow.
That was the reason why they got rid of the children too.
It's horrible. It's horrible. But see, that's God's righteousness, right? And that God knew. And we have to know the character of God. As Christians, we understand that He is love, that everything He does has a purpose. But people from the outside looking in just use this as their escape. Right? I don't have to obey a God who's going to murder all these people, and He killed 20,000 people in whatever many, all these nations, and now we see why.
The interesting thing is that the Canaanites, the children of Israel were camping for many years right outside here. And they watched them go. And they heard about them. And they heard about their God. But because time was passing and all these children of Israel were doing was just camping out there, just living out there, they thought that even though we heard about the crossing of the Sea, and even though we heard, oh, they have destroy the Amorites and the Hittites. We have not seen anything. We are fortified. Can we in our lives today get into that same state of complacency?
Yes, easily.
Easily.
Yes, easily.
And so I think that's a lesson for me from this lesson. God is telling us about what he has prepared for me and what will happen before. The time is delayed. Am I getting complacent?
Well, we know that these people that were in this land, they were depraved anyway. So as the generations go on mentally, they're going to get less and they're going to get more cunning with evil and less susceptible to things like, oh, there's a God who has power, you know. Their gods is basically, I'm going to kill 15 kids and then I'm going to get a blessing over here. That's how their operation is. And they don't understand the concept of a loving God who cares about every soul. And, you know, it's just, what? That's foreign to them. That's foreign to them. All right. The holiness of God's character means that he cannot tolerate sin. He is patient. However, sin must reap its final consequence, which is death. Romans 6:23. Yahweh declared war against sin. Regardless of where it was found, whether in Israel or among the Canaanites, Israel was not sanctified through the participating in holy wars or more than other nations, any more than other nations were. Even when they became the means of Yahweh's judgment against his chosen nation. Different from other ancient Near Eastern people, the Israelites experienced the reversal of holy war when God did not fight for them, but against them, allowing their enemies to oppress them. That's what happens, right? That's what happens, right? So the same power, and this is what we as modern day people who are of the camp of God ought to believe, right? We walk around as if God is fighting our battles and he's on our side, but when we do wrong, we don't expect the oppression of the Lord. We don't expect it. We expect mercy. We expect the loving, forgiving Jesus of the New Testament God. Like there's not going to be any consequences. You know, we pray for our consequences to be, you know, as far as a whole nation of Christians, we have to be aware that there is a balance to this thing. So when God starts to step in and do things miraculously, our obedience and sacrifice and consecration has to go up, because the moment we don't do what's right, then we experience God's oppression. That's scary, right? You wonder why, and you know, you started out as a Christian in your life, eventually things happen, and you're like, oh, God is oppressing me. We blame him, and then because we know this concept is true. Who has the power to oppress us other than our God if we choose God? So if we're going through some type of oppression, some type of we ought to realize God is trying to teach me something. God is pointing out my iniquity. Where is this place where I'm holding on to sin that I need to give up, that I'm not? Those types of things. So it's a two-edged sword. The provision of God, the blessing of God, the power of God. We want to see the latter rain, right? That's what we're waiting for, some future. I see your hand. Go ahead.
So, not that I don't agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
But I see it a little bit different.
Give it to me.
If we separate ourselves from God, he allows the devil to do, right? He allows it to teach us, but I don't think he's doing it. It's just a result of our separation from him. And so
Yes.
I just don't like to see or believe that God intentionally will do something to hurt. Rather, is a consequence of our own actions.
Okay. Anybody else have anything on that? I personally have a different opinion, but it's fine. Go ahead.
That was it.
There's a blessing in here somewhere.
There's a blessing in here somewhere. We just don't see it.
Okay, yes. There's a blessing in here somewhere where we just don't see it. So God is sending us a blessing in disguise. Okay.
Before you move on to the next phase, having gone through the lesson, I have come away with a great dilemma. And I don't know if I'm not understanding well, but when you reach to the point where you are studying about God's holy wars, my concern is this: how do you reconcile the fact that war is evil? War is dangerous. War is taking people's lives. And then God is engaged in holy war. How do you navigate this challenging dilemma that God on one side is holy and the people on the other side are human and sinful, and then God is killing them?
Okay. Well, that is the crux of the whole entire lesson. And before we go to that point, keep that mentally. I wanted to go back to the previous question, which that is great. But so my way of looking at it is very similar. You know, she's basically saying that the Lord is he's stepping back and allowing consequences to happen to us, right? But God also teaches us to chastise our children, right? He says, if they do wrong, you should not spare the rod. So that is a deliberate act of inflicting pain on a person in love, right? That's a deliberate act of inflicting pain on a person in love. So God, when we, the oppression that we may feel or that he uses in this scenario is at a national level, right? That's at a church level, not just an individual. So if God is going to step back and say like he did to David, right? I'm going to step back and allow your consequences to happen, and the tornado is going to come in and wipe out all these people because I've stepped back. That is a direct oppression from the Lord because of sin, because of how you've acted outside of his, and there has to be consequences. He's going to allow the consequences that would have happened to happen. So they're both lockstep together. God is allowing wickedness, which is always present, to happen, but he's also deliberately inflicting pain on you. So you wake up out of your sin and your complacency and say, you know what? There are consequences, because he doesn't chastise the people that he doesn't love. He allows them to do what they want to do until they kill themselves.
Okay. Is it a holy war, or is it God with his judgment?
They're using holy war because or
is it God?
God in his judgment. I think they're using holy war because of the counter argument from Muslims, right? Right? Yeah. They believe in jihadism and that there is a war type. So this is basically
the
word games.
Israelites were directed by God.
Yes.
They just didn't go and say, we want that land and go. They were directed by God because originally it was theirs through Abraham.
Yes, and it's a campaign. It is a war. So now how do we reconcile God? How do we reconcile that? So one of the early. Go ahead.
I'm going to take you back to the point.
Okay.
That says that God allowed this to happen. God cannot do bad things. God allowed. God is a good God, a just God.
Okay.
God will not do bad things, but God allows bad things to happen. And God is evil, and we have to go back to the conflict that started in heaven. Now, if God, and that's what I got from the lesson this week, and I'm up for discussion on this. If God allows sin to continue and to get pervasive and without stopping it, without allowing something to stop it, the entire world would be destroyed. And we can look at this from the story of Nineveh. When Nineveh was warned that God was going to destroy Nineveh, the people repented, and Nineveh was not destroyed. But then let us look at Noah and the ark. Noah preached for many years, 120 years. Nobody repented, and they were destroyed. So God allows things to happen.
That's
If
a
we are
fascinating
not,
discussion.
yes.
Did he allow Sodom and Gomorrah?
Yes, he did.
So
And
he
look at-
didn't say, I'm going to
look-
destroy this place and call down fire and burn it?
Remember the discussion with Abraham.
I
Right?
won't. He says, I
He
won't
said,
do
if
it.
you can find fault, he started at 50, and he went down, and he went down.
Yeah.
So it means that God had done everything possible. He even sent angels there to pull out the people
Yes.
who trust him and serve him.
But he eventually, he did it.
He had to stop it.
Eventually, he did.
Yes, he had to stop
that's
it.
a consequence of
So,
sin.
yes, he allowed it.
It's a fascinating discussion, and I agree with the concept, of course, that Jesus is merciful, that Jesus is always going to do good, right? But at the end of the day, he is ultimately the judge, right? At the end of the day, God ultimately will destroy himself from the throne, all wickedness.
Or we destroy ourselves based on the decisions we make.
What about Job?
Okay?
You know, that's one example that I like to use. He didn't deserve it, but who acted and who allowed? So at the end of the day, I believe that the destruction, the burning, Sodom and Gomorrah, was a consequence of their actions. Who actually let the fire come down from heaven and burn them all?
There's
That's a discussion. That's a good point. But at the end of the day, our actions will determine our outcome. It's not God himself, because he's a God of love. He can judge, and he judges justly. Nonetheless, it's not his will to destroy or to kill anybody. And so,
I see your hand.
yeah.
There's a challenge here that God has dealt with. And one of the things that created what we're discussing here this morning is that God made human being with the power of choice.
Yes.
So whatever we want to do, we can do, because we have the power of choice. What God has to do is put in place a plan to rescue us after we have messed up ourselves. And so what we are saying here this morning imply the idea that we are blaming God for what is happening here and for the holy war that have been fought. And we still have wars that are being fought. The point is that because we can make whatever decision we want to make, places, from a human point of view, places God in a dilemma, which actually there is no dilemma. But from the human point of view, God places himself in a dilemma because he gives us the authority to do anything we want to do, to make any decision we want to do. But what he does, and this is the crucial point, that God loves us to the extent that he was willing to do whatever it takes to bring us back to himself. And that is why he sent his son, Jesus Christ, who has paved the way and has created the avenue through which we can change the dilemma that we have found ourselves in. And that is the beauty of the gospel.
Go ahead. Yeah, why are you all the way over there today?
All right, you know, God is constantly, through the Bible, being accused of destruction or killing. But the question I want to ask you, does the Bible say thou shalt not kill? Can God break his own law?
Probably not.
No.
He won't.
Not at all. And that's why God will never allow himself to be in a situation where it's possible that he can be accused of breaking his own law in killing people. So, you know, that's the mystery of God, is how things happen. Like we come along and well, take Saul. The Bible says God killed Saul, but yet the Bible also says Saul took his own life. You know, God didn't kill him, but he's being blamed of all this stuff. And so it all comes down to God's character. What is God all about? And I think we're going to spend a lifetime just trying to figure out, maybe even beyond the lifetime, figuring out God.
Killing and murder maybe are, you know, a difference in that scenario, because if we look at it, there's a lot of killing going on, but not unjustified killing, especially when we talk about a holy God, because a man almost touched the ark, right? And he died. He died. Pharaoh's heart was hardened, right? And then his sons were killed, like they're killed. They're not. So there is that there. And this is, I think it's beautiful to think about how God loves us and how he's always reaching out for each and every one of us. That there is no extent that he won't go through to save every individual. And when it comes to a point where God is willing to say that's enough from that person, we ought to think about what that really means. You got to think about what it really means for him to look at a whole entire nation and say, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forevermore, but these people have to be cut off. These people have to be destroyed because I have poured my spirit on them over and 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 over, and I can keep going over and over and over again. But at some point, God's righteousness, just like the man who almost touched the ark, his holiness won't allow, he's coming into this land. He's going to park his crib there. These people got to go, right? Because all around they're dancing and killing kids, causing them to pass through the fire. And we think, oh, God is loving and merciful. No, God is going to burn them with the most heat he can possibly come up with so they can be immediately destroyed and he don't have to think about them anymore. That is their choice. That is their choice. He has pleaded, but he's going to come and say, you got your choice. You got what you want. Every time we sing, we say, I'm stepping back, I'm walking away. There's a hand.
Wisdom. Oh. Okay. The reason why they were killing their children is they were wanting children and they couldn't have them, and their God was actually Satan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They wanted children. So he says, if I allow you to have children, you have to give the child back to me. And that's why they were burning their children. They were sacrificing their children back to their God, which was Satan. Now, how that happened, why they couldn't have children and then they had children, I don't know, but that's what I had studied.
They were given their firstborn. It was all about prosperity. It's all about prosperity. It's all about, if I give you my son, I'm going to have a wealthy house and a prosperous land. And if we have victory in this battle campaign, we'll offer you 12 children. That's the type of thing that they're doing. They're basically it's demonic worship. That's exactly what it is. Exactly what's going on today, right? That's exactly the same exact thing that is going on today. So go ahead.
Isn't it true that many, many people, which would include Christian people today, when they look at God's law, they say, you cannot lie unless it's justified. You cannot kill unless it's justified. You cannot steal unless it's justified. It's like all of a sudden a person robs a bank, and so the sheriff goes after this robber, and so he stops and steals someone's horse in order to catch this robber, and they think that's all right because he's going to get the robber, you know. And so many times we look at God's law and say, well, what I did was justified, you know, and people are saying what God does is justified. But when it all comes down to it, there's no way getting around how God intended the law to be.
It's interesting that you say that, because if you think about it, it's always going to come to somebody who's got the Spirit of God for this cycle to stop. What he just said, if African Americans, and I'm just going to use us, had a holy war against America for all the wicked things that have happened to us, that continue to happen to us over and over and over and over and over again, it would never stop, right? We would just allow constant war to destroy everything that is. But because there's some God in a lot of people on both sides, the war stops, right? Let's give them something. Let's return to them this. You know, let's reach out. But it's a constant cycle of sickness happening over and over and over and again. Let's throw them out of our country. These people are homosexuals. Let's repress them. Oh no, let's give them these rights. It consistent. Only thing that stops is when somebody's like, I'm going to uphold the law of God. I'm not going to kill. I'm not going to steal. Right? In the very end of time, it's going to be a thing where it's, I think, what's the statement? If you use a sword, you're going to be killed by a sword, right? It's going to come to that type of thing. It's just going to come to that. So people are loading up weapons, talking about, it just goes on, but eventually the only thing that intercedes in this cycle of depravity and sickness is when somebody reaches in there with love and says, I'm going to love this little child, even if it's been, her mother didn't want him. She didn't get, abused, all those types of things. Somebody steps in and that stops a cycle for that child and for the generations behind it. That's why we're here. Amen. Go ahead.
Okay, what we're talking about is the law. The law is God's character. We can't forget that.
That's right. That's right. So this is a challenge to God's character, and that's what they say. Oh, God says, thou shalt not kill, yet he kills all these people.
So is it right to use one evil act?
God can't do an evil act. God cannot perform an evil act. So you starting, that's all wrong. What's the question? You want to rephrase the question? Exactly. He's cutting off evil. He's saying, I know the beginning from the end, and if this nation proceeds to continue, they're going to pollute everybody. Just like what's Israel? Israel's the opposite of that. Israel is supposed to be the holy nation of priests that step in, and because they permeate, the whole world gets the blessing of knowing God. I'm going to sit them on a hill, and they're going to be a light for everybody to see, and nobody's going to be able to attack them or take them down. That's what he originally planned. That's still us today. That's still what Jesus is. They can't take down the mountain of Christ. It's growing, and eventually it won't be spiritual. Who's next? Was there another hand? That was everybody? Well, we got through that? Okay. So this is the good stuff, right? Dispossession and annihilation. All right, so this is going to talk about God's original plan. God's original purpose for the Canaanites was not annihilation, but instead dispossession. He just wanted to kick them out. An examination of the passages that describe the way Israel had to be involved in the battles of the conquest use terms that speak about dispossession, ejection, and this dissipation carried out against the inhabitants of the promised land. The second group of terms express destruction and have Israel as the subject of the action refer mostly to the inanimate objects, so all the things that they capture, such as articles of pagan worship, objects of devoted to destruction. Evidently, the places of pagan worship and the altars constituted the main centers of the Canaanite religion. Holy war is mainly oriented towards Canaan's corrupt culture and society. In order to avoid contamination, Israel had to destroy all the elements that were propagating corruption. However, all the inhabitants of Canaan and those who, on an individual basis, recognized God's sovereignty prior to the conquest or even during the conquest were able to escape through immigration. That's a buzzword. Through immigration. And it talks about that in Joshua 2:9-4. We're not going to go there, but when you have time or if you have already read it, you know what it says. The only part of the Canaanite population doomed to destruction were those who withdrew into the fortified cities. So we know who that is, right? Obstinately continued to rebel against God's plan for those Israelites and harden their hearts. So who's a great example of an immigrant that happens in this story? Somebody who's in the lineage of Jesus was an immigrant, right? Yes. And she was considered like a lowly person, right? She was not who we would think of. Hey, we're only going to allow genetic scientists, computer scientists, doctors, we only want those type of people to immigrate into our country, right? We want the highest of the high. That's what they're trying to say there. We need more Chinese doctors, more African doctors. We need all those people who have all this education. No, this was a low-level person. She was a street urchin almost. So, wow, that's who God has a heart for. So that kind of informs who we should have a heart for as a nation. And, that's a deep subject. I don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. However, all right. Harden their hearts, all right? However, this does raise the question, if the initial purpose of conquering Canaan was to drive out the inhabitants of the land and not to annihilate them, why did the Israelites have to kill so many people? Analysis of the biblical text related to the conquest of Canaan revealed that the original intent of the conquest implied the dissipation of the Canaanites' population. However, the majority of the Canaanites, like the Pharaoh of Egypt, hardened their hearts, right? We talked about that. And as such, became one with the culture to such an extent that the destruction of the culture meant they had to be destroyed as well. Woo, that was a lot. That's really deep. That's really deep.
What is being perpetuated here, which gives me even a greater challenge, is that you use one evil to rectify another evil. So evil will always be perpetuated.
Who is the accusatory you in this scenario? Who is the accuser? Who are you saying is you? You stated
the system.
The system.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we're extrapolating here.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, the system.
The system.
And it's being perpetuated.
So
no.
you're taking this from a standpoint of not directly related to this text, but in general how we do it in our time today.
Because what is happening here is that what is being implicated is that one evil deserves another evil to fix it. How do you reconcile this from the point of view of a holy God?
Point of view of a holy God. I think we already talked about how holiness and sin cannot coexist in the same place. They cannot coexist in the same place. Like that's,
You're absolutely correct. And when there is a culture, remember the word culture, it means that this is something that is ingrained. This is the practice of people. Let us just bring it closer home. If you are running an organization and you find that there is a group that is perpetuating a bad culture within the organization, what do?
you fire them.
Exactly.
You get rid of them.
You
try to neutralize the element.
You have to neutralize that element for your organization to grow. If we apply that to God, and I said it before, if God had allowed evil to perpetuate without a stop, this world would be destroyed. Remember, God knows everything that will happen. He knows what happened, and he knows how far. Just like the Tower of Babel. If God never confused those people with different tongues, we don't know what the extent will be because we are human, but God knows. And so God will always put measures in place to prevent evil from perpetuating.
And I like what when he talked about the hornets, right? Because this was specifically targeted at the people who said, we are going to stick with empire, right? We're going to be kingdom builders here regardless. And God is like, no, this is where I'm going to build my kingdom. So you can leave, you can go. And they offered them peace. They said, hey, every time they offered them peace. It says that. So they went in and said, hey, we want to come through your land. We want to be over here. And they said, no, we're going to destroy you. Our God is greater. So then that's a challenge to who God is. And then that kind of makes it automatically a fight between the spiritual war, right? Which we know is battling nonstop, which is actually a real war. It's not just, this is literally a war. A sinister evil has tried to destroy everything that God stands for, and he is slowly but surely expelling him from this land. Do you have another hand? Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh.
They have a police department. We have a police department today. Why? For the bad people. They capture them. If anybody murdered somebody, they put them in prison. Some they even put to death.
Mm-hmm.
Are they breaking the law, or are they upholding the law?
Capital punishment? That's another question. It's a capital punishment.
But even putting them in jail for
Try to go
life.
through all the philosophical arguments today.
Yeah, but they had a jury to decide this.
Yeah.
So-
Peers make the decision in that
Yeah.
case, and it could be their life. Well, the fact that the Lord is been patient, we've seen that. We know he's patient in all the scenarios. Even when he was with Egypt, he was patient. He gave them all these opportunities to let the people go. So we coming into another scenario where they have power and authority in the natural world, and God is saying, I'm setting up a kingdom that is different, and I want my people to have this particular area which I have promised them, and I already know that you guys are not right. You guys are going to cause a problem. Even if I build my nation somewhere else, you're going to be the future problem that my nation has to fight again anyway. So I'm going to take you out in the beginning, and I want this land. I want where your base of power is, where your groves are, where Satan is sitting up laughing in my face and doing like this, right? Killing babies, and that's what he's doing. He's got a whole entire nation where he is the boss. That's sick. They outwardly doing it. This is not like here in our world where they got to hide behind bars, right? They got to be in a corner somewhere. Eventually they're going to try to come out, believe me. Believe me, if you think it's going to be hidden and undiscovered forever, no. Eventually, they're going to outwardly say, we do this in apostasy, and then God is going to be like, okay, I got to go. It's over. The same way he did with them. Got to see your hand.
I used to be the program director of a residency program, and there was a lot of just evil that was going on under the table. And I would get new people in, and they would tell me, oh, Dr. Maycock, once these bad third years graduate, then it's going to be better. And they kept telling me that year after year after year, because the evil it perpetuated. They left it there, you know. I mean, it was ingrained in the culture of the new people as they kept coming in. And so the well is now poisoned. Like, there's no way. That's why God says you got to destroy them, because you can't clean it up. You can't clean up the well if it's poisoned. You got to just fill it in with dirt and
start all over. It's already poisoned. You can't get clean water out of it, right? You dig again, and it's in the soil. That's very, very sad, and that's a real world scenario of what's going on. It's like there's generations of problems. You know, if we move in here, we start to do right, eventually, how can you do right when the whole nation wants to do wrong, right? Everybody around you wants to do wrong. We have to, at some point, it makes sense to separate yourself, right? At some point, it makes sense to draw a line and say, we are not going to do what you're doing, so we're going to do our thing over here. And God is like, no, I want you to do your thing right here where evil is. We got to get them out of here. It's funny to use hornets, because that's what they are to the land, right? They're in there, they're destroying everything, they're building up their little mounds, and no, he uses hornets to get rid of them, because they're the pests that are messing up his world. Funny, right? And he wants them to disperse. Yes, instill fear to fight them down. And then we know who ran into their walls, and they encapsulated themselves, and they said, we're going to stay here and we're going to build empire regardless. You can't touch us. And then God had to say, okay, all of them have to go. You can't keep anything that they have, right? Because we know everything that they have is dedicated to this, what's his name? Some super stupid name, right? We know his name. I forgot his name. Chemosh. I think that's their God. So they're talking to him, and they're like, hey, this is our guy. And God is like, no, that's the end of this thing. And people are, like in our day, looking back on this and saying, this is an indictment against a holy and loving God. And this lesson gives us several tools to be able to combat that argument. That's what it's for. God is not angry. God is not mean. He's not vicious. God is still looking at them as sorrow as he has to expel them. That's who our God is, right? He's not willing that anybody should die. And when it comes down to it, they have made a decision. He gives them what they want. These people want to be destroyed. They're not happy in what they're doing, but they keep doing it. Have you seen people in that type of misery? Drug addicted, sin addicted, coming from abusive homes, like it's so crazy that the world is how it is. And I know that there's going to be a lot of questions regardless around this subject, because who started these people being evil? Was it their great-great-grandparents? I understand your argument to have empathy for anyone that is in a sinful state. Anyone who is in a sinful state, even the most deprived person in a sinful state, didn't really have a perfect choice in their whole entire life. Has anybody here ever had a perfect choice? Like, this is the perfect choice? If you ever got a perfect choice, I want to see your hand. Because we're usually choosing the best of something